So we're going to talk about synchronicity today. And so our agenda will be just an introduction of myself, a little bit about synchronicity itself. What exactly is that? Some of the more theoretical models and methods, including some of my most recent work that is actually unpublished at the moment. So you're getting it number one. So then some critiques as well of synchronicity and how that fits into the world, and then a little bit about the future or possible futures, and then some question and answer. So a little bit about myself. I have quite a long background in consulting, mainly technology and user experience design. I run my own coaching business, as Yali was explaining. And really, I see myself as a futurist at the moment. So somebody who's really looking in a business sense at like what's coming next in the future. And why I'm so excited to be at Sophia is because I really get an opportunity to look into the future that's not just physical or emotional or mental, but maybe these sort of more spiritual and energetic way in which we can start addressing the world and society. So really an opportunity, I think, for some very big things to happen as the world perhaps becomes more artificially intelligent and like this. So I think there's some very exciting times, especially at Sophia. I have, as you see on the screen, a background in linguistics, computer science, and also Vedic science, which is of the Indian traditional spirituality, and about to finish my PhD. So it's all written up in a draft. So just getting that all approved this year. Um, and I've worked with many different corporations and been involved in some books and some conferences over the years. So really quite a broad experience from business and technology, but then also academia and all of those companies. Quite impactful in the world. So it's a great honor to be able to work with them. And you can see the little black circle there says 100 miles. I also like running very long distances. So when I'm not at the screen, I try to get outside and go for long runs. I recommend physical activities. So, um, okay. And do raise your hand if there's any problem, and I'll hopefully myself or Sophie or another will catch your question. So synchronicity experience awareness. This is a term that I created, and really what we're going to look at today is exploring just the background and the overview of these meaningful coincidences, something which happens, and then we sort of make meaning out of that. And how does that really happen? And how are we aware of those experiences, and what's that really like? So beyond just the synchronistic event, what exactly is our awareness of that, and how are we relating to that, and so forth. So, why I'm very excited about synchronicity, and you'll probably find this as you progress. I know you're probably at the master's level, but as you get more into your own work and so forth, you get quite excited about your topic. At least I do. So, why I'm excited about synchronicity is, I think we all have these meaningful coincidences. Things happen, and Carl Jung was one of the first to really talk about it, where these experiences seem to occur in our life, and but there's no real connection, no real cause. Yet for us, it's quite surprising often, and we reflect back on that. And I'll speak more about that in a moment. I think culturally, some of the what we would term loosely as kind of Eastern traditions, as opposed to Western, uh, do have a lot of this sort of idea of synchronicity built into those traditions, and I think that's very interesting how the East and West are coming together. And some of these more, what we might call more ancient traditions. I'm originally Irish, so coming from, the Druids and shamans and Hawaiians as well, and so forth. And then how that connects, into our culture. And then, of course, there's all therapies in transpersonal psychology. We're extending, including, and transforming how people are experiencing life. Of course, at Sophia, we have the opportunity to then actually do research on this. Like, how does this really work? And what are the methods, and how can we explore this? And I will speak a bit about that. And of course, one of the biggest things I think that's missed a lot in other universities. They're obviously great universities in the world. At Sophia, though, there's a lot of personal growth, and it was quite unexpected for me as I got into these synchronicities and understanding how they worked and how they worked with my participants and the study that I did. It was actually very powerful for me in understanding how, we're all connected and how it's so important. So, um, I'll speak a little bit about synchronicities in a minute. I just want to ask you, though, just to think, just reflect, and it's a big part of how we operate at Sophia, as I'm sure you know. Just to think for yourself, has anything ever happened to you in your life where, just something just had serendipity? It just sort of occurred and it connected sort of out of the blue, or it was magical. And just think in your head, maybe a little bit, have that in the background of your mind. I think that will be quite useful. Very, very briefly, just one that just comes to mind. I have many of these now. One event I had, I was in a train going through Turkey, right? So somewhere I hadn't been very often. And I had to stand because the train was very full, and I was standing beside another person, roughly my age, and this gentleman. And I started talking to him, and at the time, my girlfriend was a nurse. His girlfriend or wife was also a nurse, and then we had similar interests, and we were both on this train in Turkey, and we kind of looked a little similar too. It was quite strange, and we are just chatting because we were on a train journey and we had to stand in this area. And I said, "Wouldn't it be funny if we were born on the same day?" And we were. Our birthdays were the same day, and I was just standing there. And so when it hits you like that, you're like, how is this possible? And then you try to work it out. And I have some Turkish in my genetics, or Uzbekistan, and you're trying to, but this really, in a way, when these synchronistic events occur, it's quite difficult to logically, in a scientific way, go, oh, it's because of this and this and this, and here's the reasons. And so when you start thinking about these experiences, it's very easy to immediately try to make it rational. And I think that's part of the science part to understand it. And I think the most interesting part is more qualitative than quantitative. Like, how are you feeling about that? How do you feel connected to another human or another event when these things just arise? So I would just ask you to reflect a little on maybe some experiences in your own mind. And we can certainly, in the questions and answers, talk about that type of thing. But yeah, it can be very beautiful and magical when they happen. So, what actually is synchronicity experience awareness? Well, it was really Carl Jung and Pauli, who was a quantum physicist, who really started talking about these meaningful coincidences without a cause, or the term is acausal. What I did with SEA, synchronicity experience awareness, and I'll just say SEA from now on. It's much more subjective, and it's about our own patterns, revealing these sort of ways in which we're connected in the universe. And what I've attempted to do, and we'll be publishing this at the end of the year, is extend what Carl Jung talked about and get into sort of the, how synchronicities might actually create our experience. We're actually, so something is coming through us and it's creating the world that we're experiencing rather than these experiences coming to us. And I also think it's important to incorporate artificial intelligence and then the impact on society. And I think a lot of people at Sophia enjoy that idea that, we're actually trying to help society as a whole and provide healing and so forth. So synchronicity experience awareness is a broader term than Carl Jung's initial paper and his work with Pauli. His first paper was in 1952, and where he mentions it, and then I think actually in Edinburgh in Scotland where he gave the talks. Anyway, Carl Jung, very interesting if you read his actual background as well as his work. Very interesting, and more work is coming out as we speak as it gets translated. Um, so as we know, transpersonal psychology itself extends, includes, and transforms our experience of life. So really, these synchronistic experience awareness events, I believe, are connected into our yeah, our really to do with our consciousness, that we're all moving inside a field, and that field is called consciousness. So with the traditional synchronicity, um, you know, the whole idea is that everything is sort of post priori, meaning an event happens and then we kind of reflect back on it. With SEA, the idea is it's a priori, meaning everything is synchronized already in the field, and then we just kind of co-create and interact with that. So, from a transpersonal psychology perspective, this is a phenomenological experience. It's like your actual as lived, realistic experience of life, and actually connects much more to kind of our spiritual growth and our, how we actually exist here on Earth, as opposed to scientifically trying to understand how these synchronicities are occurring. So, sort of the main point here being not post priori reflection, but actually some sort of a priori creation. Go to my next slide. Okay, so a little bit of the theory and philosophy and psychology. I actually enjoy this part quite a lot, and a lot of my literature review in my recent research focused on this. So I actually went quite deep and found there were lots of links. Of course, Jung would have read a lot of this material, and he spent a lot of time traveling around the world and actually meeting with people, and had one of the biggest metaphysical libraries, I think, in Europe, if not the world, at the time. So, just for your own reference, there are many citations and references at the end of this talk. Uh, so synchronicities are built on folks like Hume and Kant and Spinoza, and then of course Eastern philosophy as well, where we think more about, certainly in the more Indian traditions of dharma and karma and how we have a purpose in life and then what our actions are. And then from a transpersonal psychology perspective, this also aligns. Maslow, of course, in his really, originating of transpersonal psychology, Husserl, who's looking at things phenomenologically, and what is the experience, so the actual experience, and then how do we make meaning from that, and the, I believe, Danish philosopher Kierkegaard spoke quite at length about that as well. So this idea, even predates Jung, and so there's a lot of philosophical background to the roots of synchronicities and how they actually occur. People have been thinking about this for a long time. One of the people that has thought the most about it is an Israeli researcher. Her name is Russo Netzer, her last name, and she created the REM model that I really like. I think it's very powerful and it's nicely constructed. And I actually used one of her instruments, a survey tool, in my own research. So the REM model looks at synchronicity, experience awareness, receptiveness, what the encounter is that you have in some event, and then meaning detecting, like how we actually make meaning from that. So kind of being open, having some sort of interaction, and creating an emotional response usually, or like my surprise at meeting kind of my doppelganger or somebody very similar to myself, and then what we make of that in terms of meaning. So as you can see written there, this really, you know, the extension really that SEA brings is that we're connecting to that in a very conscious way, and it's about creation. And the idea from a transpersonal perspective is we're connecting the spiritual then to our actual actions in the world. So there are many methods, for studying synchronicity, for studying anything really, in the transpersonal space, and I'm sure you'll come across many of these. The folks that I'm citing and providing references for today are specifically tied into synchronicities. Um, you know, uh, there have been criticisms of synchronicity and how you actually go about studying it because it's very subjective. If you'd seen that person on the train that I interacted with, you might have noticed that we maybe looked somewhat similar. I think he was maybe 5 years younger than me or something, so you might not have seen what I saw or connected in the way I did 'cause it's very subjective. And so that's very hard to replicate. So that's very challenging in a lot of the work that we do because it's so inner and subjective, and how do we do that? But to me that's part of the excitement, and actually enjoying how we put these experiments and these studies together, both quantitative and qualitative, kind of mixed method studies. So several researchers are very powerful and useful in this area. I'm just kind of listed them here somewhat chronologically. So Krantz really helped create a methodology for first person accounts. So it's how, when people actually are telling you directly what they experienced. Main was very useful. In terms of getting to the intention, like what actually was underneath what people were experiencing in terms of their intention. Steger produced one of the most robust tools for looking at these different states of consciousness and sort of kind of quantifying the meaning. And so, a lot of these researchers have produced tools that other people can use. And as we all keep using the same tools, we start like creating more data for how well they work or not. And then improving the overall field as we study not only synchronicity, but everything from a transpersonal sense. And then Weichmann, who's actually a quite prolific current researcher, I believe, based in University of Virginia, I believe, up near Washington in the United States. And he sort of is connecting everything to a much more kind of spiritual sense. So many different directions can be useful for finding methods for studying synchronicity. Of course, Weidman's scale, the WCS, is very powerful. And then I mentioned Russo Netzer. She actually created the synchronicity awareness and meaning detecting scale, and that has been very reliable. And just again, just to make the point on the transpersonal side, that the synchronicity is actually correlated with personal growth and well-being, because as you feel the world is more synchronized to you and your experience, then it actually can have a subjective effect on you in terms of your well-being. So, why I think synchronicity really matters, in a transpersonal realm is, well, kind of these three main points, as you can see here. This idea of causality, we do live inside a cause and effect world, and you do this and you get that. I mean, all of science, in fact, operates that way. Synchronicity is a much more kind of quantum physics aspect where perhaps space and time aren't aligned in that way, that the past, the present, the future may operate all at the same time. So this idea of something causing another and time's arrow may not be how the universe actually works from a physics perspective, so hard physics. So this is very interesting, looking at something quite subjective like a synchronicity, and then thinking about how does that sort of transcend our normal experience. Of course, pardon me. Of course, this always has therapeutic impacts if we can believe that we're much more interconnected. That can have a greater sense of meaning for people in their lives. And as some of us may become therapists, I think that's a useful thing to think about, that this isn't just research for the sake of it. And of course, the spiritual growth side of things, I think there's a lot of writing online from, I believe her name is Bethany Butzer, Butzer. Um, but her work is very interesting and I think very modern, and also brings in quite strong feminine aspect to looking at spirituality growth and the kind of scientific pursuit of that. So I would recommend um, checking out her work. And of course, there's a future potential here, right? Because it really matters what's going to happen in a world of AI and technology. And I spend some time actually in my own work looking at that, like what's coming next by 2030, and really exploring synchronicity in these sort of, ways of viewing and kind of different ways of learning and understanding from an epistemology sense and an ontological sense. So our meaning and our being, who are we in the world, and what do we do about that? And what is our reality going to be like in sort of a potential set of futures? And of course, people are skeptical of this. When we start talking about these types of things, even the term transpersonal, people, are kind of curious. What does that mean? And so as we extend and include and transform, human behavior, I think that a lot of critiques are going to come up. I did mention Vise beforehand, who is suggesting that perhaps this can just be chance, just accidental. But if you've had any of these synchronistic experiences, and people who meditate more, by the way, for example, tend to have more of these, interestingly. So maybe say more about that in the Q&A. That it becomes very clear as you have the experiences that it's not chance, and so. Um, One of the other aspects is this idea of it's just subjective recall. So, you're just remembering something, but that isn't really how it happened. And this occurs in many aspects of transpersonal psychology, dream work, for example. We have Dr. Angel Morgan on faculty, core faculty, who looks very deeply into that state of consciousness. It's very, very interesting and a lot of parallels to my own work where people are very skeptical of dreams, but when you really look at the creativity and what comes from the inner world, there is just endless power in that, and that could be applied to business or coaching or consulting or many different ways. So and really, sort of the response I would give, and I've kind of made a few notes here. Groff, of course, and his wife very famously, looked into how we actually, kind of use specific transpersonal methods to really look at what's happening and, kind of, produce data around that. Another response is that we probably need more quantitative tools. I have mentioned a few, of course, Russo Netzer's SAMD tool and others. Um, are very useful because they're repeatable, reliable, and now so many people have used them that and getting very similar results that it's starting to become statistically more interesting. My own work didn't go as heavily into the quantitative side. But I think we certainly need more quantitative tools as for the sort of mass market out there. This is tends to be seen more objectively, although I think the future will be more about the inner work and the more subjective work, which is why I myself progressed from sort of a consultant to, an executive coach to then more futuristic of, okay, not just coaching people with their past, but like how are they creating their future? And of course, that ties into the subjective values being just as valid as the kind of objective and external values. So just a few kind of final notes here, so some future directions. Maybe some of these might actually appeal to you. So integrating AI, I think, will be very interesting in this type of research and looking at synchronicities, looking at how coincidences are occurring, what are the patterns in them, especially if we have a large amount of data that we can gather, either qualitative or quantitative, or using thematic analysis, as I did in my own work. I think then AI could be very useful in kind of going through and finding patterns from maybe thousands and thousands of people having such experiences, or even in the dream world, for example, written dreams or anything like that. So that could be quite interesting how we actually work with AI. And then, developing assessments, as I mentioned, exploring the global and cultural and spiritual context. So not just East and West, but North and South, and really everything around the world, where perhaps in, as little as 5 years, we might not recognize countries in the same way. We might be getting to a point where we're interconnected in a very different way. Maybe even brain to brain interfaces within 10 years or humanoid robots, and how do we interact in these new cultural environments and support people and provide healing and remove stress and trauma and so forth. And of course, that's all based on spiritual practices that many folks have, either religious or just their own practices. I think that's a very interesting area to kind of bring alignment to some of the work that we're doing, and not maybe be trapped in just one paradigm, but having this sort of multi-paradigm approach, or a total or universal approach, which I think, this sort of universal concepts of harmony, respect for ancestors, ethical living, these are really central across all traditions, whether East or West, or wherever we're kind of growing up and learning. So I think that's one of the nice things about Sophia, really powerful things, is that we do look at all these different areas with equal weight, and really deepening our application of the transpersonal. So, I just really would say embrace synchronicities in your life. I know I've just kind of given an overview here today and some of the research, and that synchronicities are a real thing that people are really experiencing. in their state of consciousness. And it's really transformative, I think, when you become aware of these experiences, start looking at them and see how all here humans have them, just as I had mentioned, dreams or, everyone has dreams or some nature. And how we're all interconnected in the world. And, this sort of work starts to bring together really interesting areas: psychology, philosophy, spirituality, even, quantum consciousness. And so I think what this does, especially, at Sophia, just inviting a real openness and awareness and interconnection. So I just kind of maybe leave you with the thought of Carl Jung, who really brought this term, into being for a lot of us, certainly in the West, is that synchronicity reveals the meaningful future connections between our inner and outer worlds. So here are some references. You're welcome to grab some of these and we can maybe share a PDF. And thank you very much. So, 감사합니다. So I think, let me just get the video back up. Well, I think I hope you enjoyed that talk. Got some thumbs up, flat. Yes, feel free to send emojis and so forth. I think the suggestion was if there's any sort of questions and answers, I'm happy to talk about that. I'm happy to talk about how I progressed into this work or where it might be going in the future, or even if it's something very specific just to you. And how, if you're thinking about a PhD or anything like that, I'm happy to answer any questions. There's no question is wrong, and we're all together here in this safe space. So I'm sure you're used to that from your professors. So if you have any questions or anything wasn't clear, don't feel embarrassed or shy. I maybe didn't explain everything, uh, as well as I could. So please follow up with any questions like that, or just even if you have a comment, doesn't have to be a question. If you like this graphic image on the screen, I can talk about that as well. So, can I say, does anyone have any questions? Okay, I think, yeah, just begin speaking. Yeah.
먼저
Bay?
하실래요?
Yeah. Yes.
Ah, so Gordon, this is wild. It's very eye-opening presentation that you were providing us with. Um, I'm not surprised by synchronicity itself, but like how the research around synchronicity has gone like above and beyond. Like try to like measure it and do the whole research about it. Um, yeah, with that, I have two questions to ask. I personally often feel that even the smallest events in everyday life can seem magical depending on how we make interpretation on them. But that makes me wonder how exactly do we define synchronicity? If we say it's simply a meaningful coincidence, then the standard becomes very subjective, as you said, since meaning depends entirely on the individual. So I feel like that makes the concept somewhat unstable. So I like to ask you your opinion on it, and then that leads me to another question that um,
And
my
let's
question
come
is
to
that
this. Let's come to the second question next. Is that okay?
yeah,
Yeah, because I won't remember because you asked a very
sure
big
thing.
question, so I won't remember the next one. So you'll have to say it again. Okay, thank you. Yes, thank you for your lovely comments as well. Well, this is why we study these things. Because it's not clear. And Carl Jung, brought this term synchronicity into the world in 1952, and that's why I've looked at it from so many different directions because there's a little bit of quantitative measurement, EEG, heart rate variability. There's a lot of different ways we tried to correlate and understand these synchronicities. So I would say, number one, it's factual that people have these coincidences that occur, and they aren't just like, oh, I'm wearing this color shirt and you're wearing this color. It's not it. They're actual events that are quite impactful, and people just can't understand the probability that that could possibly happen. So number one, there's a big impact on people. I mean, Carl Jung basically said synchronicities are acausal events, meaning they're an event without a cause. Now, our entire existence is based on cause and effect, as the philosophers have talked about, like, you do this and you get that. Now, what's different is when quantum physics on the other side started to talk about there is no, Newtonian physics. Like that's a sort of a pretend way of looking at physics. It works and we can put rockets into the moon with that physics. Quantum physics, as you probably know, talks about entanglement, talks about Einstein called it spooky effects at a distance. Where one particle is affected by another. We've actually teleported particles now from one place to the other. We've measured these particles at micro, I mean, thing called quarks. We've measured the parts of a proton. We've measured them. And so, synchronicity is just kind of our human surface level experience, I believe, of quantum physics. And quantum physics isn't really up for debate. I mean, this stuff is studied in a very hard manner, and by people who maybe aren't as much like us. They aren't maybe as caring I mean, in their lives, of course they are, but in their work, they're not looking at how is this going to heal somebody. They're trying to like get some numbers and measure things and scientifically know. So I think there's a subjective part currently, and that's because of Jung's creation. And that's why I'm attempting to bring in synchronicity experience awareness, because we all have awarenesses and they are certainly experiences, and we're calling it synchronicity. But I think it's like you say, it is beyond the subjective. I think it's subjective and objective, and we just haven't quite got to the point of how we measure that. My own research, which will be published, I think in September, by Sophia, begins to look at this. And I will say it was quite eye-opening for me too, because I had the same. That's why I looked at synchronicity. And I also looked at consciousness with deep meditators, because they seem to have a different view of the world sometimes. And I looked at meaning itself, like what is meaningful? So yeah, it's a really really good question, and I think there are now some very strong quantitative measures where we can actually say what meaning is and how it really works. And the last thing I'll say, from if when you look then in other topics like sociology and economics. And there's a person called Kahneman, Professor Kahneman, Kahneman, I believe. Um, and he wrote a paper called Prospect Theory in 1979 about decision making and how we make decisions. And it's called Thinking Fast and Slow as a book. So he wrote a book, Thinking Fast and Slow. I think it was President Obama's like favorite book for a while or something. So this is very interesting when you look at decision making, and some other folks have looked at decision making in the brain and how it has an economic and social impact. And what they're beginning to discover in that field has an impact on how we see the world and what it means. What they are discovering is our decisions are preset even before we think we're going to make a decision. Like, like the food that I might eat today is sort of, culturally controlled in a way of, I might have, British baked beans on toast, right? Whereas, there might be kimchi or something, so our decisions, in a way, and I'm just being a little silly with those examples, but, our decisions can also be, controlled. So, by external means. So I think there's a huge topic there around meaning, and the point that I really want to say in summary is that there are many influences now, and in an area like transpersonal psychology, we can really look at those and sort of tie those together and see how they overlap. So you're absolutely right, to be skeptical, and I think that's why these things are worth researching. And yeah, I welcome your research. And sorry, your second question?
It's very simple, personal question. So, from your presentation, I had a sense that to increase the synchronicity in my life, setting the intention, like having the intention to experience it is also important. And as you briefly mentioned, the meditation can help as well. So I'm wondering, what is your personal method to experience more of that?
Yes, great question. Both of those things, actually. And then a third thing as well. So I use a technique called transcendental meditation, TM, which is basically an Indian philosophical approach from Maharshi Mahesh Yogi. And I find that that is the simplest technique for transcending physical reality and dropping down into this field. And then when you're in that, and many traditions have this as well, but I think meditation has the most research that backs up the fact that if you meditate more, then your brain rewires in different ways and you're less stressed and so forth like that. I think then in the world, yes, there's intention setting. And intention isn't necessarily a goal, in my view. It's a setting a space to move into, and so that we're creating our lives. So, a lot of people in the West, every January, New Year resolutions. Okay, this year I will lose weight, I will run, I will eat better, I will, all these things. And what I like to do in my coaching with my coaching clients is I set intentions in November. So so coming up this November, before the end of the year, I will create these new spaces with my clients that I'm working with, and then just start applying those in the world. And that's really the third element. It's karma or action. So action, when you then use your intent from a meditative state, just do your meditation with no intention to do anything, just meditate, transcend, whatever your practice is go for a walk or swim, whatever it is that works, breathing techniques. From that practice, then create a life of intention. Like, well, what am I intending? Without attaching yourself to a goal or an outcome, and then take actions related to that in the world and see what comes back. So it's an echoing back from the world. So I'm always, take when I was asked to give this talk, I said yes immediately, right? But this is fresh research. This is like unpublished what I'm talking about. Like no one's brought this together yet, but it's like I think this is a good thing, especially speaking to this audience, and I this is somewhat, there's no real attachment to, we have to create a paper together at the end of this or anything like that. So it's like taking actions because it aligns with who you are and what you want to put in the world. So I think those are the three things is I'll say transcend, intend, and then create, take action and become a coach. Maybe Kim, you had a question next, I think. Or
Yes.
yeah, yeah, okay.
I have my question is more related with your personal story or your personal
Yeah.
connection with synchronicity and spirituality. So, uh, as a consultant, when and why you attract to synchronicity and spirituality? Do you have any kind of eye-opening or awakening moment in your life, and then you switch to the life course?
Yes. Yes, this is a perfect question. This is a summary of the last 30 years or maybe more. Certainly since last century, so maybe yeah, like 30 years of my life, maybe more. Um, so I studied languages first of all. I was just good at languages and I enjoyed them. but I also had computer science. So I thought, oh, I'm going to do something with languages and computers in Europe, work at the United Nations, something like that. And those jobs didn't really occur. And So I started looking at the computer science side of things because it was quite interesting. And I got into consulting that way and ended up in America, doing that work. But I was always interested in the interconnection with people, languages and everything. And so an area developed called user experience design where I realized in supporting people with their technology issues decades ago that people were very smart. It's just the technology was hard to use. And a lot of my engineering friends at the time thought that the people weren't very smart and they had problems and we need to train them and they have to learn that. And I was like, no, you've got it the wrong way around. It's people are great. I've spoken to these people. I got to know them. The technology is hard to use. And so a lot of my career was like, let's talk to humans, see what they are issues they have, because if the technology is easier to use, they're going to use it more, and then everyone's going to be happier with the website or the programs like that. So as I got into this work as a consultant, I realized I was dealing not just with the people using the technology, but the people deciding what technology to use, like their intention. And those leaders really, didn't really have a big vision. So I ended up, being an executive coach, like working with the leaders who then they made better decisions that helped more people. And after a few years of that, working with quite high level, I mean, sometimes I had to kind of pinch myself to make sure it was real. Um, that I was in, very big meetings with quite powerful people, and I realized that there was something deeper that was driving them. There's a deeper purpose and spirituality. I mean, they talk about the spirit of an organization, the team spirit, and it might not be religious in any way, but there's something deep in all of us and it connects us. And why do we go to work every day? Why do we do things, that are difficult? There's something that has people work at, Samsung or Apple or Microsoft or any of these big, companies, they get connected in some way, some sort of personal way. And certainly, there are benefits, that aren't just spiritual. So that's really was my progression from consultant to coach. And then I thought, well, we need to start talking about what doesn't exist, like out there in the future. And then I looked at the future because I could see technology, it was an exponential curve. So what I mean by that is over this amount of time, a small amount of time, um, usually only a little changed. But in more modern times, because the curve is getting so steep to almost a vertical, a small amount of time is a lot of change. And so that's really was my progression that we need to go and do inner work. We need to work with the inside of people because that can happen very quickly. When you have a breakthrough, and you really meet with somebody, and I've had many hundreds of these experiences at this point. Um, when you really get down to what they're doing, like what is your purpose? Like what, oh yes, I'm trying to make money. For what purpose? Well, I want to make people happy. Like for what purpose? Well, if people are happier, they work better together, and then eventually they end up saying something similar like world peace or freedom. I'm like, well, why don't you work on that? Like, why don't you work on what you really want to work on? And so I think with the advent of artificial intelligence and all the changes coming in the next really 5 years or less, I think that that's where I felt like this sort of transpersonal, extending and including and transforming our inner experience. I think that is sort of like the quantum physics of human behavior. Like it's the deepest part and actually, I really do believe this can start coming into the business world and how we take action and how we operate in the world for, a happier, healthier world, that the world of healing and kind of psychology does not have to be separate from business. And we're already seeing it. We're seeing meditation rooms in businesses. Microsoft company completely changed how they operated. They brought a psychologist in and they got into the, out of the fixed mindset and got into a more open and growth mindset and future focus. And so I think there's a lot because of external pressures that people are beginning to realize that a lot of the things that were very fixed and done in a certain way aren't going to work anymore, and that they're maybe not going to be what humans focus on, and that maybe it's time to upgrade the humans. We've done enough technology upgrades. Hopefully that helped. I got it. I'm quite excited by that topic.
Thank you.
Yeah. 감사합니다. I'm happy to answer any other questions or anything about Sophia, even as well. Anyone maybe we haven't heard from? Hi, Lipping. Hi. Oh,
질문하고 싶은
yes.
게
This
있는데요.
is Liting.
Oh, okay. Oh, hi. I think there's
하이.
another question. Yes, hi.
어, 저는 이 동시성을 우리가 공부하다 보면 우리가 동시성을 알아차리고 매 순간 경험하는 사람이 있고 동시성에 대한 인식이 없는 사람이 있잖아요. 이렇게. 저는 동시성이라는 개념에 대해서 알기 전부터지만 알고 나서도 굉장히 매 순간 동시성을 경험하면서 지내고 있거든요. 그런데 동시성을 경험하지 않는 사람과 동시성을 경험하는 사람 사이에 뭔가 차이가 있을까? 예를 들어서 동시성을 경험하는 사람은 더 많은 동시성을 경험하게 된다거나 또는 동시성을 경험하지 않는 사람은 동시성의 경험이 있음에도 불구하고 인식을 못하는 걸까? 아니면 동시성의 경험이 덜한 걸까? 이 차이가 있는지 저는 궁금한데 그것에 대해서 답변해 주실 수 있을까요?
Um, and- can you hear me well?
It's a little echoey, Sophie. Sophie. I think
Okay.
this. Yeah, but it's okay.
Yeah. Yeah.
And what was that
As
person's name,
I,
please?
uh-huh. Okay.
I didn't catch her name.
Fixed it. Is it working now?
I can hear you. Yes.
Mm-hmm. Her name is Hyejeon. Is it right?
Okay.
맞나요? 이름, 성함,
저 해아요. 해아.
해아. 네.
해아천.
Her name is
Heya.
Hyeja.
Heya.
Uh-huh.
Okay.
And she as she studied synchronicity, she's noticed that some people seem to recognize and experience it in every moment, while others appear to have no awareness of it at all. And even after learning about the concept of synchronicity, she found herself continuously experiencing it in her daily life. And she was wondering that if there was a difference between those who experienced synchronicity and those who didn't. So, for example, people who already experienced synchronicity are more likely to experience it more, or they just
Yes.
don't realize they're experiencing it.
Well, this is true of everything in life. And I don't know how you want to translate. Shall I say a couple of sentences and then you translate, or
Mhm.
is it translating for me, or I don't know.
Yeah, I
How do you
can do
want?
that. Yeah,
Okay.
consecutive
So
translation would be okay.
okay. So number one, I think these experiences are very typical for many aspects of life.
네, 우선 이런 경험들이 매우 전형적인 양상이라고 생각이 됩니다.
And in my work, I have seen that people who have more spiritual practices like meditation, they also experience more synchronicities, and that seems to be correlated to the meaning that they experience in their life. So this is something I'm currently writing. So it's very a new idea, and there's definitely, in my view, um, maybe I shouldn't say definitely. There's a strong correlation between uh, your state of consciousness, synchronicity experience, and meaning.
네, 분명히 좀 영적인 활동이나 명상을 하는 분들이 동시성을 더 많이 발견을 하시고 또 삶에서 더 동시성과 관련해 의미를 찾고 계신 것 같습니다. 그리고 실제로 이제 골든님께서 그것에 대해서 글을 쓰고 계시기도 한데요. 그래서 이제 뭐 학원을 할 수는 없겠지만, 어떤 사람의 의식의 상태와 동시성 경험은 강한 상관관계를 가지고 있다고 볼 수 있을 것 같습니다.
Yeah. Hopefully, this aligns with your own experience, and we need a lot more research in these ideas. So I would encourage you to maybe read some of the references, or you can follow up with me or others. I think there's a lot of interest in, seeing, like Carl Jung said, it's like seeing the inner and outer worlds connected. So I think I would encourage further research in this area. It's certainly very lacking at the moment.
네, 그래서 혜연님께서 경험하신 것들이 지금 제가 설명한 것들과 좀 연결이 잘 됐으면 좋겠고요. 네, 그리고 여기 자막에도 나오겠는데, 칼 융이 말한 것처럼 우리의 내면 세계와 의식 세계가 연결되어 있기 때문에 공유해드린 그 레퍼런스들도 참고하셔서 앞으로도 관련해서 소통하면서 논의를 더 발전시킬 수 있었으면 좋겠습니다.
Yes, thank you, 골든.
Yes. Excellent. Very good questions. Any more? Maybe we think we can do maybe one or two more. I don't know.
추가 질문이 있는데요. 이거는 한국어로 질문을 드리도록 할게요. 그러면 고든이 이런 싱크로니시티나 스피리추얼리티에 관심을 갖게 되던 시기에 개인적으로 이런 영성적인 수련을 하고 있었는지, 그리고 처음에 이야기할 때 아이리시라고 이야기해줬던 것 같아요. 그래서 뭐 드루이드나 이런 이야기 줬었던 것 같은데, 어쨌든 그런 그 아일랜드 사람들이 가지고 있는 영성적인 세계관이 지금 일을 하거나 또 싱크로니시티라는 거에 주목을 하게 되고 그걸 잘 수용할 수 있게 되는데 영향을 주었는지가 궁금합니다.
Yeah. Were you personally engaged in any spiritual practices during the time you became interested in synchronicity, or spirituality? And also, you mentioned earlier that you're from Ireland, and Ireland has the spiritual worldview of the Irish people. And did it influence your current work, or did it help you um, more become feeling easy to get into this field, synchronicity?
Yes, and I'm number one. I'm most interested in consciousness, and then synchronicity for me occurs inside of consciousness, both the subjective and objective. Um, so in terms of practices, yes, I am what's called a TM Siddha. So that's a style of transcendental meditation. And in fact, the largest group of students at Sophia are from a university in America that study exclusively transcendental and what's known as Vedic, VEDIC, spirituality and technologies. So that's my actual practice, but it's only been a few years, maybe 5 years, 6 years. Um, what I would say more broadly about this is um, as I've explored consciousness, synchronicity, and meaning, um, people who are involved in those areas tend to have more awareness, and also they actually do seem to have more synchronistic experiences, more coincidences. And in fact, maybe since birth, they've felt like life is always showing up and they sort of they wait until they expect life to happen a certain way. And so it's very interesting that it maybe is not even the spiritual practice itself, that there are certain people who are born in a state of consciousness where they are more receptive, like shamans and other, probably the Hawaiian tradition and the Irish druids and West African shamans and Aborigines and in the Americas or Australia. I think all, and of course in the East as well, that certain people, I think, are born a bit more tuned in, just like certain people have different eye color or height, or it's a characteristic that it might not be the practice itself. The practice, I believe, refines that and improves the attunement to accessing the field. And then from that field, which is very similar to the quantum field of physics, from that field, all reality arises. And these people seem to be able to access that field more rapidly and more powerfully and consistently. Um, in terms of where I was born, I'm sure that has an impact. I wasn't necessarily inside of any, ancient spiritual practices growing up, but I think if you're born in a certain part of the world, you feel like some connection, and like it might not be spoken, but maybe it's even cultural, or maybe you feel yourself drawn to reading about Confucius or, somebody, and you get sort of connected, I think, to these deeper ideas. So I think that has an impact. The last thing I'll say about Ireland, it is believed that a lot of the ancient Sanskrit, which is the language that the Vedas, it just means knowledge in Sanskrit, Veda, that moved all the way westwards and actually ended up in Ireland. And there, even the word druid, which is like a kind of a healing person, uh, they believe comes from two Sanskrit words, Dru and Veda. Dru means hidden or dark, and Ved or Veda or Vid is knowledge. So hidden knowledge, Druid, Druvid, Druvid. And so there's many examples like that in the Irish language and in any of these ancient cultures that tie back through Sanskrit and then back to even earlier languages. And of course, many Eastern traditions have this too, and Hawaiian and so forth. So I think there's um, I think anybody can access these fields and then bring them up to the surface and use them in the world. The nice thing about a synchronicity, I think it shows that connection to almost anybody. To me, it's very like a dream. Like anybody can have a dream, but then not everyone. Why am I seeing a spider in my dream? Like, what's the spider mean? And it's not so much the interpretation, but it's the symbolism. Carl Jung talked a lot about this, and others. So I think it's understanding the power of that field that you can access. And then as we practice and we do scientific studies, and we look at it from many different directions, I think it can start to reveal really this field that we're all moving in and interacting in. So I think there are many different ways to approach it. And I would always recommend any sort of meditative practice to everybody. I think it's the number one thing we can do for less stress in life, some sort of meditation or breathing or walking meditation like this. So I hope that helps answer your question. Very good question.
네, 먼저 아주 좋은 질문 해주셔서 감사하고요. 저는 아까 말씀드린 그 MT라고 하는 명상을 5년, 6년 정도 해왔습니다. 5, 6년이면 사실 그렇게 오래된 거는 아닐 수도 있는데요. 그리고 이 MT라는 명상 방식은 Transcendental Meditation이라는 거의 약자고 네, 어쨌든 5, 6년 정도 실천을 해왔는데 실천 자체가 길다기보다는 그 이전부터 의식과 이 동시성의 의미에 대해서 관심이 많았고 계속 탐구해왔기 때문에 그거랑 관련된 경험이 많았다고 합니다. 그래서 꼭 이제 골든의 경험이 영적인 실천, 명상적인 실천 때문이 아니라 어떤 문화적인 측면 때문일 수 있을 것 같아요. 그리고 아이리쉬의 영향이 있었던 것도 사실인데요. 예를 들면 아일랜드어에 이제 드루이즈라는 단어 이야기도 하셨는데 이제 이 드루이즈라는 사람은 힐러를 의미한다고 합니다. 그래서 드루는 숨겨진 혹은 어두운이라는 뜻이고 그 뒤에 있는 부분은 지식을 의미하기 때문에 숨겨진 지식을 전하는 사람이라는 뜻을 가지고 있습니다. 그래서 실제로 산스크리트어가 유럽을 거쳐서 아일랜드까지 전해져 왔다고 하고 아일랜드뿐 아니라 다른 문화권에도 산스크리트어나 혹은 다른 동양의 고대 전통과 연결된 전통들이 녹아 있습니다. 네, 하지만 이제 이 이런 고대의 관습 안에서 살아온 것은 아니라고 해요, 개인적으로. 그래서 그냥 사람이 각기 다른 눈이나 머리 색깔을 가진 것과 마찬가지로 동시성을 많이 경험하는 것도 좀 타고난 부분일 수도 있다고 말씀하셨습니다. 그리고 이제 개인적으로 동시성의 좋은 점은 모든 사람들에게 연결을 실제로 보여준다는 것이고, 그렇기 때문에 골드는 그 동시성을 느끼는 게 마치 꿈과 같다고 이야기했습니다. 그리고 융이 말하기를 동시성은 해석이 아니라 상징이라고 이야기했고, 따라서 그 영역에 접근할 수 있는 힘 자체를 느끼고 이해하는 것이 중요하다고 강조하셨습니다. 그리고 이걸 느끼기 위해서는 명상이나 어떤 영적인 활동들이 스트레스를 줄여주는데 아주 효과적이기 때문에 도움이 많이 되고 더 강하게 이제 추천을 하신다고 말씀하셨습니다.
감사합니다. If there is one last question, I think we can have one more. If anyone wants to ask, hopefully everyone has some thoughts, and maybe I recommend just writing some notes for yourself. You never know when some ideas can come up later, can be helpful for your papers, and maybe not this specific topic, but maybe something another student asked, or maybe ask another student or share, what you experienced. I think that's one of the things about transpersonal work. As we talk to each other, we start to realize some of the patterns between what we're doing, and in making interesting connections. And I think this is the most important work we can do, is the inner work of human beings, and creating community and connection. And I really do wish all of you good luck in your studies. This is, I believe, important work, and certainly in a world of a lot more technology and changes coming. So I think working on the human side, I think, is probably going to be the best job opportunities also. So, in my view, so I thank you all very much. Unless there's any more questions, we probably okay. Just anything else anyone wants to say?
I do have one question.
Yeah, 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 yeah.
Not related to the synchronicity, more about the artificial intelligence and
Yeah.
consciousness. Um, People are painting all different pictures about the future of AI. Um, um, can you elaborate your view? Because you have technology background, right? So do I. How do you think this AI, this start with a pattern matching mechanism, will eventually evolve? How will it help us to have a better understanding on human consciousness and its personal existence? Do you see a role of AI in this question?
Yes, if I understood correctly, there's a little bit of echo with your other device, I think, but Yes, so if I understood correctly, the question is, and how can we work with AI? And there's many different ways that it can happen in the future, and what are some maybe some viewpoints. So I think number one, everyone can have a view about AI because this world is changing very rapidly, and
Yeah.
I think one of the difficulties we can have as psychologists or spiritual scientists is that we maybe don't want to focus on the technology side very much. The thing is, I don't believe anybody asked us if we wanted an internet. I don't think if they asked us about social media or voted on having mobile phones. And for most of the planet, there's those are pieces that we have in our lives, and we, even this technology today to allow all of this, to happen. So I think AI will be like that, except just more widespread. So I think it's going to be part of the world that we live in. Most people in the West, anyway, will say, "Oh, just Google it," And I think people are now using these AI chatbots, the current version of AI, to instead of search, they're having more conversations. So I think that's one shift that people's access to knowledge and how they find out what reality and truth is will begin to change and maybe be recorded and develop relationships. You don't really develop a relationship with the Google search engine, but I think our interaction for knowledge, just at the knowledge level. Um, so I think data is handled. I think the information age is sort of encompassed now in digital technology. So I think the next level is knowledge, and I think that too will now be encompassed in an artificial sort of world. Um, so the next point is wisdom. So after knowledge becomes wisdom, which isn't necessarily something you can write down. We just have wisdom about, how the world works, if we get in the ocean, we don't expect it to be 200 degrees temperature or, boiling. We expect the ocean to be in a certain range or the sunshine or, there's a certain wisdom about the world and we just generally know these things. But I don't think we've spent a lot of time as human beings in the world of wisdom. We've sort of been in the world of data, like knowing the right answer or information or knowledge. So I think that's the second sort of shift that as the technology increases and becomes more available to everybody and we're interacting with it more to develop our realities, then I think the task is actually to upgrade human beings. Then I think the next point is I think we'll have two types of humans on Earth. Those that actually work with these new technologies and those that don't or don't as much. And
Mm.
I think there's a lot of fear, a lot of, it's very unknown. Nobody really knows what's coming next. I did mention it in my presentation. Um, I think that there's ways we can use AI as a sort of a tutor, a very, very knowledgeable, maybe not very wise, but a very knowledgeable partner that we can have conversations with and try out many, many ideas uh, as an example, or even for students, as a tutor who said, look, you can say, look, I understand everything. I need to go faster. Or no, I don't understand this topic. I need to go slower. And so maybe the tutor can go at different speeds and depths and bring in different examples that are relevant to that student and their culture and like that. So I think there's many
Right.
ways we can integrate, and then there's ways that maybe people will not. But I think on balance, I think it would be a smart idea for people to understand what these technologies are like, especially because the next wave is not going to be chatbots. I think they are
Mm.
going to go away and we're going to get into agents, which go off as an agent and do kind of larger topics sort of on your behalf. And they kind of work for you. And I think we'll see companies that have just one or two, three people, and then hundreds of agents that are doing the work. And so I think that's really the next stage that's coming, this idea of agent technology. And that's really developing a relationship with the agent, which I think is quite a psychological and philosophical issue. So those would be my thoughts on that.
Yeah, your last expression on extension and partnership actually means a lot to me. The reason I brought up this subject is because, yeah, we all experience and notice a synchronicity. Recently, I found that this synchronistic CI experience in dealing with AI. When I raise a question, when it pops up with some synchronous some outputs, and the outputs, the meanings and the morals of this output that made by AI actually is synchronized with my inner soul, my inner healing, and my inner voice system. Is it I don't want to admit it, but it's quite a transcendent experience. So
Yes.
I'm starting to think maybe AI is not an external tool. Maybe it's not quantifying pattern matching mechanics. Maybe eventually, if not now, will evolve into an extension of my consciousness.
Yeah, I think this
Maybe
is very
not my
possible.
consciousness. Yeah, maybe a collective extension of the collective souls. So we'll have to recognize and admit that as an entity, maybe AI could be a artificial consciousness as it is.
I think it's a
And,
great idea. Yes.
and
Yeah,
that's why your use of word partnership means a lot to me. Maybe it is. It is the future that we are facing.
yes, and I think these are psychological questions and philosophical questions. Like, who are we? Our identity. If there's something that knows a lot of information, do we trust it as wise? Is it going to guide us? And then there's also the boundary conditions. At a certain point, we just trust people. Like, people get married. I mean, they don't spend 50 years together and then get married. Like, they meet and maybe 1, 2, 3 years, like, okay, I trust you. You're a good person. And then they get married, and the divorce rate in a lot of the world is 50%. So, like, just as an example of how we interact with other beings, or just even people you meet, you try to explain that you're studying transpersonal psychology, and they're like, what is that? How does that work? So you're going to meet different people in different states of consciousness, and they'll just either go along with your ideas or not. Like, it might not be something, like social media is another great technological example. Like, on balance, I would say we're probably a little bit more negative with social media in terms of the benefit to humanity than positive, in my view. It has many, many great benefits, but maybe it's like 51% negative or something, that and we don't really know how to use it. We just share all these things and the problems occur, and people have arguments, they don't even know the people. And so I think these are issues that have not been addressed at any level, at a government level, at the planetary level, in terms of safety and alignment and moral philosophy, ethics. I mean, a lot of the AIs just grab it, knowledge and information from the whole planet and then just repackage it. So that's sort of taking other people's information, which is generally not seen as a good thing. So I think we're in the perfect place because we've got to sort of think about these inner consciousness. So consciousness is not just your awareness of the world, like you're conscious or unconscious. Consciousness, in my view, is sort of this field that we're all operating in. Like, we are consciousness, we're a part of it. And so I think, yes, I think AI will be part of consciousness in the future, but it may be, the consciousness of a chicken as opposed to the consciousness of our friend. It may be a state of consciousness that, we like the chicken, it's just fine, or a cat or a dog, or we like it just fine, and we interact to a certain level. And there are the last thing I'll say, there are people who've developed very strong partnerships and relationships, even wanting to marry their AI and as a partner because they feel so connected. But maybe we need to upgrade human beings because or upgrade our view on identity which is again a very difficult topic. Like, how do we, who are we, and then how do we interact with these new entities that really appear, you know, quite powerful and quite human to us, and stir up our emotions and make mental connections. And so I think these are great questions, and I don't think there's any single, future. And that's why on the screen I put, could we establish new futures, right? So this idea that there's not one future, but I think there are many futures. And I think we're in a position to start doing that more inner work to balance the new outer world that's coming. So thank you.
Mm.
Great questions, everybody.
Thank you.
Yeah, yeah, very good. Very good. And my email address is there for anybody if you want to follow up, or I think there'll be maybe some more talks and other presenters and different things. So, and or following up with Yali or others. Yeah, very happy to continue any conversations if there's any follow up. And you all have very great questions. I'm very honored to be speaking with you. Thank you.